Shellings and barrel bombs have pounded this city for nearly 2 weeks. Small businesses like this bakery were leveled just as fresh bread was rising. Homes were blasted with families inside. Yesterday, rescue workers pulled this unconscious baby from the rubble of nearby Idlib. The sign of life was overwhelming. But without working hospitals, doctors say the fate of those rescued is unclear. At least 4 children died this week because hospital beds were full.
Tonight, Hurricane Matthew already deadly and closing in on Haiti.
The wind just started to pick up. The rain's getting harder.
Now packing 140-mile-per-hour winds, at one point the strongest Atlantic hurricane in nearly a decade. But it's the storm's slow speed, moving at just 7 miles per hour, that makes it so dangerous. We made our way into Haiti today from the neighboring Dominican Republic. The outer bands are already starting to bring heavy rain, and the worst of the storm is still hours away. Parts of the island could see more than 3 feet of rain, potentially triggering deadly mudslides. Making matters worse, 6 years after the disastrous earthquake of 2010 that left more than 200,000 people dead, more than 50,000 people here are still living in makeshift shelters.
As we know, we're not really prepared for the type of hurricane, but we're doing the best that we can.
And at this orphanage outside of Port-au-Prince, they've boarded up the windows and moved their more than 60 children to the 2nd floor. The storm has already killed at least 4 across the region. In Cuba, the U.S. military has already evacuated 700 military family members from Guantanamo Bay. This man warns residents to evacuate. Long lines are forming for food and supplies. Worshippers of this church pray they'll be spared. And with odds increasing for a landfall in the U.S. later this week, states of emergency have already been declared from Florida to North Carolina.
And the U.S. has broken off talks with Russia over a ceasefire in Syria. The State Department says given Moscow's bombardment of Aleppo, there's nothing left to discuss.
Police officers have fired rubber bullets and used stun grenades to disperse student protesters in the South African city of Johannesburg. The clashes erupted on Tuesday as authorities tried to reopen the University of Witwatersrand following weeks of demonstrations. Students from different campuses have been protesting against the cost of university education. Last month, the Education Commission announced fees would continue to rise by as much as 8% in 2017. Protesters claim the hikes are prohibitive for students from poorer backgrounds. Officials say funding for universities across the country has been stretched due to economic problems.
At least 22 people have been killed by a suicide bomber who targeted a wedding party in ahchyam province in northeast Syria on Monday. The bomber set off his explosive device inside a hall in Tal Tawil village during the wedding of a member of the Syrian Democratic Forces. The SDF is an Arab-Kurdish coalition which has been fighting against ISIL militants in northern Syria. On the same day, a leading al-Qaeda figure who was a prominent member of the Syrian Nusra Front was also killed. The US Defense Department reported that Sheikh Abu Faraj al-Masri was the target of a US airstrike near the northwestern city of Idlib.
Italy's Coast Guard has rescued more than 4,600 migrants and recovered at least 28 bodies in a rescue operation off the coast of Libya. Officials say the migrants were traveling in 33 overcrowded vessels on Tuesday. Since the beginning of this year, at least 142,000 migrants have reached Italy via the Mediterranean Sea. Of those, more than 3,000 died either from drowning or suffocation. Most of the migrants come from Africa and are seeking asylum in Europe.
Recently, United Nations Peace Day was celebrated in Austin, Texas. That's right, United Nations Peace Day, a celebration of complete hypocrisy.
It is so critically important that we join with the United Nations effort begun in 1981 to declare this day the Day of Peace and to recognize and celebrate the 11 days of global unity beginning on September 11th, and whereas the International Day of Peace challenges all people of the world, to consider what it means to be human and to rededicate themselves to our shared humanity. Now, therefore, I, Steve Adler, Mayor of the City of Austin, Texas, do hereby proclaim September 21st of the year 2016 as Peace Day in Austin, Texas.
The same United Nations fomenting the growing possibility of World War III as Russia is demonized rather than met with diplomacy simply because they will not bend to the will of globalism. The same United Nations with peacekeeper forces that routinely rape the children they are there to protect.
It's doing everything we possibly can to assist the victim, to bring accountability and justice for them.
The same United Nations that is on the verge of crossing the threshold on the ratification of the Paris Climate Pact, which under UN Agenda 2030 will tax every human activity and force humanity into densely packed megacities under UN control. The same United Nations gradually taking control of your local police force under the Strong Cities Network to establish a global New World Order police state. The same United Nations that wants to replace the natural world with a genetically modified one. Yeah, that United Nations. Oddly enough, the host of this hypothetical UN Peace Day was clueless of the United Nations Agenda 2030.
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with 2030.
If you weren't aware of it already, Agenda 2030 is a ramp-up of the totalitarian Agenda 21, intended to accelerate the New World Order system with major changes beginning in 2018. Meanwhile, populism is sweeping the planet, and the anxiety festering amongst the globalists is rising. A Bloomberg chart documents the usage in terms like uncertainty, fear, risk, worry, destabilize, and tensions, among others. From the meeting of the UN Agenda 2015 Assembly until the latest UN Agenda 2016 Assembly. And it's as blatantly obvious as the UN Agenda's supposed Peace Day, which appears inviting on the surface.